Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. So, I've had discussions about the Congress, how should I say, from a BJP perspective, many times on the podcast. But I'll be beginning today's podcast by admitting my guilt. That I was always feeling guilty that never discussed Congress from a Congress perspective. And recently, I came across Anil on Twitter. I should say I should not have come across Anil on Twitter in that way, but so long story short, I saw a resignation letter, and I saw Anil resigning from certain posts inside the Congress party, and then I found out that Anil is also a friend of a dear friend of mine, Abhijit Iyer Mitra. And as soon as I saw that, I told Abhijit that I want to talk, because I think I'm guilty of never understanding Congress from a person who I I can still call you an insider, right? In that
Mm.
sense.
I would say, I've seen the Congress for my entire life. But then how much of an insider it is not something which I can say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but Anil, first of all, thank you very much for agreeing to
No,
do
it's
this.
a pleasure being here. Thank you,
I
Kunal.
really appreciate you doing this, because you know what happens is, everybody, look, I've never hidden my political leaning. I've never hidden it,
Hmm.
because I feel it's the right thing to do when you start a podcast or you start any kind of content or production, that you go and tell people that this is where you stand politically. But I have never shied away from many criticisms of the BJP either. But I'm really grateful to you that you have agreed to come and speak with me, because basically the title of this podcast is going to be, what is wrong with the Congress? And I say this as a concerned Indian citizen, not as someone who votes for the BJP. I care for my country more than I care for BJP. So, Anil, what is wrong with the Congress?
So, to be very honest, first of all, thank you for having me into this show. And just like what you said about your party, and more than the party, your concern is about the country. I also have been in the Congress for ever since I was born. I am born into a Congress family. My father, he uh, retired from parliamentary politics this year after 52 years. He is still in the Congress party for over 65 years. So ever since I was born, I've been seeing the functioning of the Congress. Like, I've been born into a Congress setup, and I've seen it. But despite all that, I do think that my primary loyalty, my primary interest is the country. And I do feel that in the last few years, we are going in a tangent which I would say is not really aligned to this country's political consciousness.
Oh,
And a few of us have been trying to do something about it. Even many stalwart Congress leaders who have been in this party for 4 or 5 decades, 6 decades, even many promising young people in the party who, some of them sadly left. There are some who are still remaining. They're all been trying to course correct. But sadly, in the recent times, we are not really seeing that course correction, and things are not at the best of shapes. I wouldn't say the headline should be "What is wrong with the Congress?" because I don't know. Like, that's say you are the editor; it's up to you to choose. But
so
there
what
are
is right with the Congress then? That,
so
I guess I can ask that question then.
see the Congress party. Like I said, like I was born in this setup. Like, I've been seeing it since I'm a kid. And I do think that in the last 75 years, in that 75 years, 55 or 75 years, the Congress had governed this country. And unlike what many people in the ruling establishment still say, I wouldn't say that everything that happened in the last 75 years is bad. The
Nor do I
our
think so.
in our 55 years also, and even non-Congress, non-BJP prime ministers also had come. There are many of. And personally, I do think that from the time of independence, our country's trajectory had been overall in a forward positive direction. Sometimes the magnitude has changed over time, but overall it has come up, it has risen steadily. And the party, the Congress party, and I would say every prime minister of ours had something to do with that. But again, there are positives and negatives, and we have contributed also in the building of this nation into what it is. So it is a reality. But then, like I said, at certain point the consciousness of the country also started evolving. Right now we are a very young country. Our median age is, I think, around 28 or 29. I do believe that almost one third of our country is under 18. I think almost 65% is under 40. And in the you are seeing changes in that population, especially the young population. I do believe that they are very aspirational set of people. And currently, I seriously doubt if the current narrations and what the Congress party stand for is appealing to that aspirational India. And this is something which has been bothering me for a while. People, including me, even many stalwarts, including many of my contemporaries, we all tried our own way to course correct, but sadly, that course correction is not happening. And finally, it reached a point where I do think that, so I wrote it in my resignation letter also, where I did think that, let's say, in the last, especially in the last 3 4 5 years, our narrations are becoming more and more negative, and it is becoming more and more in a direction which is against this country's political consciousness, and sometimes even against our national interests. And I do felt, especially as a part of the communication cell, that this is not something which I can keep doing, and that, let's say, uh, took made me take a stance which I would say in my whole life I never imagined I would take.
So, on a very serious note, did it hurt?
I was not very happy about it. Definitely, this is not something which I have been looking forward to any point of my life. But sometimes when you feel that you are not fitting in somewhere and you feel that you could do something else, sometimes it is better to follow your own convictions, which is what I believe I did.
So, you said the Congress politics is not in the national interest in the last few years. So what exactly do you mean by that?
See, I'm not saying everything, but I do feel that, let's say, certain narrations have some core fundamental, I would say, flaws. Like I said, for example, from 91 was one of the watershed moments of Indian history also, where one of our Narasimha Raoji opened up India's economy, and then from then the, let's say, I would say, the real, one of the inherent potential of Indian economy was unleashed from that year. Till then, like I said, from the time of independence, I would say that our trajectory was always upwards, except 2 or 3 years where we did have certain disruptions. But overall, it was always upwards. But the real potential, I would say, was slowly unleashed after 91. And that is what kind of gave the engine for India to be one of the economic powers which we are right now. But 30 years down the line, like we are, I would say the Congress party has a huge role in what happened in 91. But I do feel that 30 years down the line, we are still refusing to own the fact that we actually did it. We are still trying to create a narration of what happened many years back, where we still believe in certain economic policies, which I don't think really appeals to the vast majority of the country nor the aspirational India. So this is something which I do think is happening even when we look at our core security interest, even when it comes to, let's say, our relationship with many of our neighboring countries, or even some of the other big geopolitical powers. Like, let's say, sometimes I do feel that the decisions are whatever we are standing for. Sometimes I do feel that whatever we are standing for is just something which is against what the government is standing for, because finally we have reached a stage where our core narration is like I myself admit, like in the last 75 years we have done a lot of great things, but you can't just focus on what we have done in the past and just focus on the negativities that are happening right now. You need a alternative narration, which I don't see is happening in the Congress, and that is a reality.
So what do you make of this criticism of the Congress party that has often been hurled at them, that they are against the cultural consciousness of India?
See, cultural, political, like the country has, like overall, I would say this country, like we have 1.4 billion people. We are right now one of the top two most populous countries in the world, and I do think that in this country, one of our biggest strengths is actually our diversity, where there are 29 different states. In each state we have different languages, cultures, sub languages. All this is a part of India. However, overall, if you look at the entire country, I do think that there is a certain sentiment, there is a certain political consciousness, economic consciousness, social consciousness, cultural consciousness, and sometimes I do think that this itself is a country that is let's say it's rediscovering our past, and we are rediscovering a lot of our heritage, our civilizational heritage, cultural heritage, etc., which over the colonial period was tampered down by because of many reasons, and we are rediscovering that. And sometimes this is all a part of trajectories. But do many of the parties actually, are they in lines with many of these trajectories? I don't know. For example, like even the Congress, like sometimes, this is why I keep saying, like many of our narrations, we are still clinging on to some of the many of our past perceptions and beliefs, which over a period of time has changed. Right now, this is a young country where almost 50% is under 27. It's a very young country. 65% is under 40, and we are not able to connect to that particular population because we are failing to understand the shift in this consciousness.
And what do you make of this? Like, I often hear this criticism of the Congress too. A lot of times people say that if you look at the policies of the Muslim League, if I was to say, and then you look at the policies that the Congress propose, proposes or supports, and I often see that people say, well, there is nothing now that differentiates the Congress and the Muslim League, and the Muslim League went with the Pakistani Indian separation,
Hmm.
right?
Why would you say that? Like, I would like to hear your view more before I can.
Okay,
I
fair enough.
can.
So, uh, sometimes the Congress comes off as that it's proposing policies that are for the balkanization of India, which was the stand of the Muslim League. Sometimes the Congress proposes policies that, I mean, I want to use a very accurate word. It is not, it is antagonizing towards the majority population of this country. Look, I don't believe in any, look, my brain functions like this. I don't look at groups, I look at individuals. For me, we're all minorities, right? We are all individuals first, and
Hmm.
then we are secondarily part of a religious group or a gender group, or whatever group
Hmm.
forming we want to have as per our inclinations. But the primary lens with which Congress shaped this country's politics was the opposite. It was groups first, individuals after. And I'm saying BJP is also pretty guilty of that. Let
Hmm.
me put that on the record. I think, but the reason is that the essence of India after independence, and it is a lot to do with the partition. We cannot ignore the baggage of partition in
Hmm.
Indian politics. I know people tend to just waltz over it. No, your destiny was shaped by a cataclysmic event that
Hmm.
happened in 1947, where basically our landmass was cut,
Hmm.
and we there were clearly people who believed Hindus and Muslims were two separate nations. I didn't say that. Jinnah
Hmm.
said that.
Hmm.
It's not like I came up with that word. Jinnah came up with that word. And when you see Congress sometimes aligning with that mindset, that hurts a lot of people. Now, your expression says, where did we send this message? But see, this is why it
Hmm.
is so important that people like you and I talk.
Hmm.
But don't you think we just, maybe this is one of the reasons that Congress has lost the perception battle, that they are being perceived as the Muslim League?
See here, let's say I would disagree on many of the things you said, but I do understand where many of your thoughts come from also. Like, for example, I do agree with, and it's a very complex conversation.
I understand that.
And sometimes a lot of things depend on perceptions and where different people come from also. Like, I come from Kerala, where I do understand that the social systems are very different than, let's say, in Punjab or many of the area, or in Bengal, or many of the areas where the wounds of the partition was very
Yeah,
deep.
especially in Punjabi communities.
So let's say, see, even when we look at the religious aspects, let's say Islam as a religion in North India, most of North India, it came through conquest, through the sword, etc. Well, let's say from Kerala, where I came from, like, it came through trade, and it mainly came through trade. So things are, let's say, even a lot of things including social harmony, etc., in Kerala is very different than, let's say, many other parts of the north because of how certain things are perceived. So this is one aspect to it. The second is, let's say, even the partition, it is something which I do think that it was something which, again, I don't know what would, how the country would have been if everything was together. Like, I haven't really, I don't know, but
Yeah, I
at
mean,
least,
we should not even think about that.
yeah, but still, I do think that, let's say, geopolitically, like what happened for India was a huge loss. Like, finally, let's say an entity which was from Iran all the way to that side, it would have been a very much more relevant geopolitical entity in this planet. That is something which I really do think. So that is, but again, what the social dynamics would be, I don't know. And then um, let's say, then the questions of congresses and why certain policies happen during time. So after 2014 elections, like my dad had given a report, a committee report, in which he had said very clearly that finally, um, let's say, we can only protect the minorities if majority also is on board. Like, end of the day, you need to ensure that this country has social harmony. This is a country where, like you rightly said, everybody is a minority in some manner or the other. Like, even like Dr. Shashi Tharoor wrote in one of his books, you go to Kerala, like a Brahmin in Kerala or a Hindu in Kerala will actually identify himself more with a Christian or a Muslim in Kerala than, let's say, a Brahmin in North
Kashmir, for
India.
that matter.
Yeah, because there are, it's a very complex social dynamics where a lot of things from religion to, it's not just religion, like finally your language, your culture, your food habits, so
Yeah,
many
food
things
habits
are,
matter a lot.
so many things matter. And so it's a very, like I would say, like everybody in India is a minority in some manner or the other, and that is what India is. So finally, but still there are some wounds which are deep, and there are some negativities which exist between certain religions as well as various castes and various communities, which has evolved over time and which stays. And this is what I do think. I'm not like a expert in these matters, but these are some of my fundamental understandings, and this has happened over time. So after partition, see, at that point of time, people criticize Pandit Nehru quite a lot, but let's say on many issues. But sometimes I do also understand like why historically he took certain decisions in the government, because immediately after partition already some deep wounds happened, and then certain people actually decided to stay in this country. They actually had an option to go, but they didn't, and they stayed in. So at that point, it was important that they were actually protected, and that is what the Congress did at that point of time. So maybe at that point of time, some concerted effort was made to ensure that they feel safe in the country, and that was done. I don't think there is anything wrong in that also. However, you are very right, and that is, finally, you can't protect the minority by alienating the majority, and we need to understand 80% of the country actually belong to one particular religion, and you cannot suppress them culturally, you cannot suppress them, you cannot create a narration that this has to be done so that somebody else have to be happy. So that cannot happen. Like, finally, everybody needs to coexist together without, let's say, suppressing anybody's culturally or socially or economically, whatever it is, and that is the only way we can move forward.
So just for the record, if anybody was wondering, the report he's talked about is the famous A.K. Anthony report, which was
Yes.
after the first 2014 election.
Mm.
But let me give you a very specific example, because I think that example is very important. When in the 1950s the Hindu Code Bill was passed,
Mhm.
there's a very famous academic paper that talks about the discussions that went. That's actually, the discussions on the Hindu Code Bill were happening before the
Mhm.
independence
Hmm.
was given to India and Pakistan both, and it was a serious discussion that happened, and it eventually culminated into whatever has culminated today. But my point is that you know that discussion happened and the Hindu code bill was passed and the Hindu society accepted it.
Mhm.
Today, the directive principles of the constitution clearly say that we
Hmm.
should aspire to have a uniform civil code. The Indian state should have a uniform civil code.
Hmm.
But having said that, even after having a uniform civil code mentioned in the directive principles, we don't have it in this
Hmm.
country. And then you see the plight. I don't know how to say it. I say call it the plight of 8 to 9 crore Muslim women.
Hmm. No, these are.
And
Hmm.
by the way, divorce laws are horrible not just in
Hmm.
Muslim communities. I'll say it very openly. The Parsi community has
Hmm.
horrifying divorce laws. The Christian community
Hmm.
divorce laws are probably per capita the worst in this country.
Hmm.
And if this should have been the plank of the Congress, right? The Congress, in the eyes of the global intelligentsia, is the Liberal Party of India.
Hmm.
Since when did liberalism
So,
become
hmm.
anti-women?
So this is like, I think we share the same sentiments. Like, finally, I don't think any of the laws in this country should be based on any religious text. It should be based on the Constitution of India, and every single Indian citizen, irrespective of their religion or caste or creed or gender, etc., etc., should all be subjected to uniform laws. I don't think there is anything wrong in that, and I think that should be how things should be.
You
But
know what, sometimes it's actually, I say this in a joking manner to my friends, like BJP was the Congress should have
hmm,
been.
a lot of things, let's say, parties themselves evolve over time in their own manner. Like, for example, and I still remember the Aam Aadmi Party when they started. Like, for the first 2 3 years, they were a completely
Yeah,
activist kind of organization, which evolved into like a properly set organization that later started focusing on governance. Even BJP's trajectory, I do remember that in the 80s, um, the party stood for Gandhian socialism. With
they
time,
still do. The constitution still says
so
that.
yes, so finally, a lot of parties, like over a period of time, do experiment with different political philosophies before finally focusing on somewhere where they're comfortable with and where they can get their mass movements
Like,
going.
just for the record, like, the people don't realize that the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, which is
Hmm.
a arm of the RSS, the economic wing or something of that sort, they have extremely socialistic views, and I mean,
Yes.
I can't relate to it personally.
So this is why I said, like, let's say the country's political consciousnesses, especially the economic consciousnesses, I
Yeah,
will say, especially after 91, has started changing quite a lot. And now is an aspirational India. And you need to actually have certain kind of economic thoughts also, which is actually catering to that particular India. And this is where I do feel that this is one of the aspects where I feel that the Congress, sadly for me, is refusing to own the fact that we are responsible for some of these most important milestone changes there, which unleash India's economic potential, but we are refusing to own that because of, let's say, we clinging to certain other ideological preferences we have from the past, from which we don't want to
but
change.
aren't there discussions inside the party that why are we doing this? Why can't we change? Like, is there no internal churn?
No, I'm sure discussions keep happening. There was a few days back also uh, there was a conclave, like there was the plenary that happened. There was an economic committee also, there was a foreign policy committee also. These discussions happen, but with time I do feel that sometimes over time it has become an echo chamber where the possibilities of debates or discussions in the same manner we used to do many years back has ceased to exist. Where again, today morning I was reading in one of the Malayalam papers on the last, I think it was 2000, where when Mrs. Gandhi became the president for the, and the conclave after that, where there was an economic plan uh, which was put forward by two stalwarts. Like, one was Mr. Pranab Mukherjee along with Mr. Arjun Singh, and then you actually had a counter plan which was actually proposed by Mr. Rajesh Pilot and somebody else. So you actually had very tall leaders who actually used to put in many diverse views, and they used to discuss and debate over it before coming to a final draft. But this time, I seriously doubt if there were any counter views, nor do I seriously think if there were any animated discussions on what kind of directions the party needs to take. Now it is more let's say you are just going with the flow.
Yeah, but where is the flow coming from? Like, the flow has to be guided, right? There has to be some guiding principle which says we are going here. Who does that then?
So this is exactly some of the reasons I said, like in the last few years, especially I do feel that when you compare with the country's demographics, I would say that I'm also like a young Indian. And
I don't
I've
doubt that.
been, and let's say you're seeing some of the elections I watched closely, like there was 2014, 19, now 24 is coming. And you look from 2014, where we actually had our worst defeat in independent history, where the party only had 44 seats. The previous lowest was in the hundreds.
Got it.
Then you had 2019, where you had 52 seats. I don't know what is going to happen in 2024. But from 2014, how much have we evolved after that historic failure? Like, we haven't evolved much at all, I would say, like, as far as any of our policies are concerned, nor any of our directions are concerned. We are trying to do the same thing again and again. And like what Einstein once said, like, you try to do the same thing again and again, like, and you expect a different result. Like, it just won't happen.
But this is mind blowing to me. Like, if you look at it from a corporate principles perspective, and if you are selling a product and that product keeps failing time and again, and the company still keeps pumping in money in it again and again, eventually the CEO is going to be sacked. I don't know how else to say this.
Mm, But then again, let's say if you are the like, so this is where sometimes there are a lot of other aspects, including responsibility, accountability, and so on. And I don't know if the current setup has any of those things, or else, like, after 2014, after 2019, some kind of change would have been there, but we are not seeing the change, and this is what is making a lot of people disillusioned. So there was a like many senior leaders when they left from so when Mr. Ghulam Nabi Azad, when he left, he wrote a very scathing letter against the leadership and left, and there were 2 3 pages in it. And I could tell that a large number of people from 29 states, many leaders, many workers, they all resonated with a lot of things he said. Like, even when I resigned and when I had calls from almost all the states in this country, 29 states, I had people, including senior people, including many people who had held very, um, like, many prime governmental roles across states, many other workers, many people had called me, and they all shared certain amount of dissatisfaction as well as disappointment with how things are evolving. Because in the recent times there was a yatra, there was the Bharat Jodo Yatra. Like, I do think that it was commendable that he walked 4,000 kilometers from Kanyakumari to Kashmir. Um, but one of the things, many people who are involved with the particular exercise, they were saying that we are not really concerned about winning elections. This is not about winning elections. We are trying to transform the country. But then I do think that political change can only be brought about by
Yeah.
having executive power. Unless you have governmental power, a political party won't be able to transform anything. Finally, there is a huge difference between a political party and like an NGO or a social
So is the
organization.
Congress, do you think, planning to become an NGO eventually?
So I don't know. So this is something else which people, including me, were wondering at that point of time. Like, again, I don't want to name people, but again, the more and more people who are joining us, they all have certain kind of background, who have been in various think tanks and NGOs, etc., for decades. And suddenly, these are the most prominent people who are joining our organization more and more. Now, let's say the plenary just happened last week. The yatra just ended early this month. And then 3 state elections, 3 northeastern states, where I would say for 65 or 75 years, the Congress were most of the time the governing party there. And 3 elections just got over. The results will only come on the second. But yesterday were the exit polls, and exit polls are not always reliable, but the science doesn't look that great. Where after all these exercises and the grand plenary, you have the first set of elections that happened in 3 states where 60, 65 or 75 years we were in governance there. And it looks like we are coming third or even worse everywhere, where somebody else is winning very comprehensively. And these are not good signs.
So this is fascinating, actually, that you have said that sometimes it looks like the Congress is not interested in winning anymore. It is more interested in optics. It's about, oh, look at me. Oh, I am concerned about the plight of the nation. But I mean, I don't get it. Politics is like a boxing match. You either knock me out or I knock you out.
So these are, so this is exactly what it is, where let's say, like I said, like I come from a Congress family, I come from a Congress background. I've been following Congress politics and India's politics since I'm a child. And I do recollect the, like I was not born then, but I do hear stories and I have read enough. And immediately after independence, the first 44 years, the Congress was de facto the number one party in this country without any, I would say, without any challenge also. Where in the first 44 years, except 4 years, the disruptive years after the emergency and that 89 to 91 period, 40
Hmm.
or 44 years, the Congress ruled this country with every single second of that 40 years, the party actually having more than 50% seats, which is a absolute
That's a
majority.
huge number.
And in that initial 20, 30 years, the main opposition party in India, like the first 20 years, was actually the Communist Party, which had very strong roots in Kerala, in Bengal. Across India, they were a national presence at that point of time. It had 40, 50, 60 seats in most of the elections. And at that point of time, their tall leaders in the parliament always used to blame Pandit Nehru, who himself was a socialist, but the
Hmm.
narration was the Congress is only favoring Tata and Birla. And then 75 years later, the communists have electorally become fairly irrelevant, I would say. Like right now, you only have 4 seats in the parliament. Maybe next, but now 75 years later, 91, I would say the political consciousness of the country, economic consciousness really started changing. And then 75 years later, we are actually saying the same thing with the communists used to say then
Yeah, only Tata
against.
and Birla has changed and Adani and
So
Ambani have
names
come.
change, but the narrations haven't changed.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is what the people in this country, especially the young people, this is not what they are looking for. Like I keep on saying, this is a very aspirational class, especially young people. Like they are looking for economic mobility, they are looking for social mobility, whoever it is. Like whether you are a person who is in some most rural areas of India, or even if you are a top tier uh, entrepreneur, they are all looking to go one step higher. Even if you are a tier one entrepreneur who is like one of the top richest in India, you are still trying to be a global elite.
Yes.
When you are a
It's
middle
a very
class, you are
good
trying
point.
to be an upper middle class person. Like a lower middle class person is trying to be a middle class person, and somebody who is in the most, let's say, downtrodden of India, also they are actually looking for better avenues of empowerment and mobility for their children, for their family. This is what India is right now, where they are all looking for opportunities. At that point of time, like we trying to have the same economic narration which the Communist Party used to have in 1960. I don't think that will cut in any manner. This is my personal point of view. Maybe I could be wrong, but this is what I feel.
So, what do you make of the accusation hurled at the Congress constantly now that they're anti-national too now?
See, again, see, Congress is a very vast organization. I wouldn't say the whole organization is anti-national. That is not what I would believe in. Like, for example, like I was there till last week also. I have many of my former
Yeah,
colleagues.
Manish in Punjab. I don't think so. Manish
Yes, yes,
is
Manish is an
anti-national.
example. Similarly,
Yeah.
there are many examples. Like, for example, I've been interacting with many of my former colleagues, seniors, and there are many who actually are staunch nationalists. Captain Amarinder Singh was another example. I would
Well,
say,
he's
like he
part of
was
the
a
BJP now.
sadly, but he was in the Congress for 50 years. There were many. Like there are many. Like I wouldn't name, but there are many. Um, but overall, the narration I would say is not something which is aligned to our national consciousness. That much I would really agree, because again, my father was India's longest defense minister. Like I have interacted with the armed forces and their families, etc., etc., quite a lot. So I have a natural, I would say, liking and respect, and there is a soft corner I have for the armed forces, which came over time. And obviously, like I am never happy when you have people inside the organization who suddenly starts questioning their efforts or their actions, nor let's say you um, or their you doubt their sincerity or any of those, and then I feel hurt because I don't think this is how things should be.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to ask you this. India needs an proper opposition. Now, it's not the job of the BJP to provide an opposition. The BJP's job is to win and govern the country. It's the job of the people opposing the BJP to come up with a proper plan so that they defeat the BJP. Having said that, as an Indian citizen, you should be concerned that there is no opposition. As a BJP voter, I am very happy the party I like is winning.
Hmm.
But still, as an Indian, I'm unhappy. There is no, they might lose, but at least the opposition has to be sound. So if we were to, because now we are going into the latter half of our discussion, what do you think is a good opposition today going to be if they were to take on BJP? Because I don't know what the model is.
And see, again, these are very valid concerns for any Indian citizen, because finally the strength of our democracy depends on all the pillars working
Absolutely.
properly. A strong governance, a strong opposition, even a strong judiciary, executive, media, all these are very important for a democracy to be healthy. But it is not the like people the people, when they are voting, the people are not going to vote saying that we need a strong opposition, and that is not how it works. For example, this is why I said an example before, where from independence from 47 till 1991, in 44 years, in 40 years, the Congress had absolute majority in this country, and people were not voting for their opposition saying that okay, we need a strong opposition. People were voting for the ruling party mainly,
Absolutely.
and the others were too
Very good point.
scattered. Then you had 25 years where I would say from 89 onwards till 2014, 25 straight years, every government that came were coalition
Coalition,
governments.
yeah, post Mandal.
And post Mandal. And then again, all those coalition governments also, all the time, there was one, except 2, 3 years of those 1 year alliance governments.
Chandrasekhar Gujral,
Yes,
you're talking about that era.
VP Singh and
Yeah.
Mr. Devagowda.
Yeah.
So, other than that, 15 years, the Congress had the government. BJP was there for 7 years.
Yeah.
And the 22 years, there was always a national party which had around quite a lot of seats, I would say, something between 150 to 210
210.
seats
Yeah.
over a period of time. And it was there to anchor a government. And then you had a lot of regional parties that were supporting it. But again, see, people never used to vote for somebody in a national election thinking that okay, you will empower the opposition. Nobody votes for that.
Yeah. Why would anyone vote for
So
that? That's like
exactly,
totally counterproductive.
yes. And now again, from 2014, once again, the BJP, I would say, have become the de facto number one pole in Indian politics. And I would say that particular organization is getting stronger and stronger with time. And this is something which I used to tell my old colleagues in 2009, when we had 207 seats, the BJP had 114 seats. But we received around 10.3 crore votes, and the BJP received around 8.9 crore votes. But in 2014, things changed drastically. It became 272 and 44. But the number of votes, our 10.3 became something like 11 point something. Their 8.9 became 14 point something. In 2019, our 11 point became 13, and their 14 point became 25 point something. So it's almost a trebling of votes. And now again, 2024, I believe that around 12 to 13 crore new voters are going to be voting.
Oh, yeah.
So, so you have a major opposition ruling party, which I do think is getting stronger and stronger because it has captivated the mind, especially of young Indians. And especially the Congress party is not able to captivate the mind of that young India. And this is a concern. Like any congressman should be concerned by that, because this trajectory is actually a trajectory towards permanent irrelevance. And people are not going to vote for you by saying that okay, you need a strong opposition. People will never do that.
Yeah. Basically, I think.
So even when all these parties are coming together right now, again there is an attempt to bring together opposition parties. Like there are many people who want to be poles in that world. But again, unless you have a proper alternative narration which actually says that okay, the BJP stand for this and this is what we stand for, in the front of, like, I'm a voter, like I would say, like, if I'm comparing two things, like unless this actually stands for a legit alternative or it stands for something which I believe in, like, I'm not going to waste my vote here. And again, this narration cannot be okay, long time back we were good and the other side is bad. It has to be something else.
So, do you think more than the BJP, the Aam Aadmi Party is going to be the cause of the demise of the Congress eventually?
This is also not something which I believe in. Like again, let's say I spoke about certain economic models of the Congress, which I say is not something which I agree with. One, I would say, like, I would disagree with Aam Aadmi Party's economic models even more. Where, see, again,
You're talking about the freebie culture?
that is one aspect of it. Again, see, right now, what is happening in Punjab, that itself, I do think that for the party will be a very significant setback. And I seriously doubt them expanding even more than what they are actually doing. That party came through an anti corruption movement. And now you have half your ministers in jail. That is not
It's funny,
certainly.
we're in Delhi right now, and right now, even the
The,
education minister of Delhi, I don't know what has happened because the
so
Supreme Court was going to
that
take
is
the hearing or
certainly,
something.
this is certainly not giving confidence to, like, I have many Aam Aadmi Party supporters and they are suddenly looking a little bewildered because till 3 months back the main narration was we are now coming as the second pole in Indian politics, or we are going to expand, etc. But whatever I am seeing right now, maybe I could be very wrong, but whatever I am seeing right now, I don't think this is the greatest space for any political party to be in, because that party believed in certain core, that party stood for certain core fundamentals, and one of them was it is an anti-corruption party, and certainly I don't think the current circumstances are really pointing to that. Then whatever is happening in Punjab again is a tragedy because it's a border state. It's
Yeah,
a state where the 70s and 80s and the first 2 3 years in 90s, the state had seen a lot of turbulence, and then in 30 years those turbulence was, it had almost ended. The state was very peaceful for almost 30 years, and then suddenly you're seeing the uprising or something which nobody wants to see. And again, at this moment I would say that the state government is not doing the
the right
greatest of
thing.
things, and all these things are going to resonate. And then even the economic scenario, like you said, like, are you looking at the freebie culture? It is not just a freebie culture. Like, I do think that, let's say that we are a country of 1.4 billion people, and in that 1.4 billion people, almost 600 million people are still in and around the poverty line. So you need social nets, you need welfare schemes. I'm not against any of those things, but finally the basic fundamentals in my head is you need to keep generating revenue before you can spend. That is how it should be.
Yeah,
But let's say in a state like Delhi, like when Sheila Dikshit left in 2012-13, the state actually at that point of time had around 10,000 crores of surplus every year. And then Indian economy has actually grown quite a lot from there. Like, for example, the size of our GDP was 2 trillion in 2014. Now it's 3.5, 3.6. So the economy has
yes.
actually grown. But you look at Delhi, the surplus which used to be around 10,000 crores in 2012 is now 2,000. Means it's this trajectory here.
Only a drop of 8,000
Yeah,
crores.
only. So, or you look at Punjab, suddenly in 9 months after that government took charge, now already you're in such, in a scenario where you can't pay your cops and teachers on time. So this is definitely not looking bright there also. So I, I don't think this is the greatest model of governance, and now people are actually seeing it, because already initially it stood for something, but now Delhi and Punjab and people are already seeing through it, and I don't think this can expand much. That is my personal point of view. Like, they can cut us in a lot of places, like they cut us quite badly in Gujarat, but then it just made things more easier for BJP.
So, if I was to ask you, maybe this can be our last segment. What do you think the BJP can improve upon?
See, everybody can improve on law. Like, obviously, it's a
Like,
part.
what are the BJP's mistakes? If I was basically trying to say that.
See, again, nobody is finally in 84, the Congress had 414 seats.
Oh yeah.
And sadly, because of many reasons, in 5 years, when the next election happened, it got reduced to 189. So things can change very fast. So, and nobody can afford to be complacent in any manner. Like last time, 270 US, this time 303. Um, but one, I would say, see, see, you are looking at our economy. Unemployment, despite whatever people say, it's a concern because it's a young India. It's a young India where every month almost 1.2 million people enter the employment
The job
stream.
market.
So that is almost what 15 million a year. And the number of formal jobs in one of the last segments I have seen that was generated in the country was in lakhs, in a few single lakhs. So that is less than 10% of the number of people who are actually entering the employment stream. Maybe the others are finding part-time employment. Maybe the others are getting into different employment guarantee schemes. I don't know. It could be construction jobs. It could be gigs. But this is not a very nice number. Also, like you need to focus on creating that blue collar formal employment, or else it it's not a very stable foundation, I would say. Two, we are the fastest growing economy in the world, and that is something which is very good. But you look at, let's say, what China had been doing from early 90s, from 90 to, I would say, around 2015, 16, in the 26 years, except 2, 3 years, the country actually grew at around 12 to 15%, or 11, 12, 13, 14, 15%. It was double digits for 2 decades.
Yeah.
And we cannot be complacent by saying that we are growing at 5, 6, 7%, because finally, I do think that our window to actually be a middle income country at some point of time depends a lot on what we do in the next decade, maybe 2 decades, 3 decades. And after that, again, we also, just like what China is having now, we will also start being a middle age and a later an old country. This is our peak of youth. So right now, our median age is what, 27, 28.
Yes.
I think our population growth has slowly started coming down, but it will.
Yeah, they say by 2050 our
Yes,
population is going to start actually falling.
yes, following. So we have the 30-year window, just like now China's population has started coming down. Similarly, we have a 30-year window. And despite us being the fifth largest economy in the world, which is again commendable, but still our size of the economy is still in and around where Japan and Germany is, where their population is Rajasthan's population and Bihar's population. We are still a lower middle income country. We need to be a middle income country, upper middle income country, and for that we need to actually grow at a faster pace. 5, 6, 7% is actually not good enough. It's 10, 11, 12% is actually required, and it has to be done in a continuous basis for many, many years for us to actually be even where China is right now in 20, 30 years' time. So we need to have that in our mind.
Mm, so if your old colleagues and the old unit calls you back, would you consider it?
See, unless something drastically changes, no.
So then, if I was to ask you literally the last question, what's next?
So this is something which I also don't know. Like I said, like things happened very fast last month after spending 5 years as a party office bearer and worker, and 30 years from the first day I was born into a Congress family. Suddenly, a lot of things changed, and it changed within a matter of 2, 3 days, and this was not something which I was expecting. So at this moment, like I said, like I'm not very happy with the. I was not very happy with the direction the Congress party was having, and like I said, like it is not standing for things which is aligned to this country's political, economic, social, or cultural consciousness. The party needs to change, or it is a route to further, and it will be a downward spiral which will keep going down. Like 2014, something happened. 2019, the number of seats was more, but you look at the vote share and the difference between the number one and number two party, it actually increased quite a lot. And I would say 2024, I wouldn't be surprised if the same trajectory continues. So this is going to be the. I do think that this is going to be the trajectory of the party unless you have a solid course correction. But will it happen? I don't know, because we elected a president in July. It's February. It's 7, 8 months. Then there was a plenary. But in that 7, 8 months and the plenary and all the new things the party is saying, like I do feel that everything is meant to maintain status quo. And status quo is not the answer for everything. You need to change, and you need to change drastically if you need to compete. Because right now, I feel that we are an organization that is still trying to, let's say, tell the public that Nokia 2300 is very good while there are smartphones around. This just can't work. So the if there is a drastic change in hardware and software, I'm open to once again contributing towards that. But at this moment, no.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like I said, it's not the job of the BJP to provide a sensible opposition to the country. It's the job of the opposition to do that, do the hard yards. But yeah, as an Indian, we can say, we should be concerned, but what's happening with the opposition in the country. But Anil, I really am grateful to you that you have spoken so freely, and you have shared your concerns, and I'm glad you also pointed out the problems inside the BJP, because most of the times what happens is that these days it's actually funny. There's a running joke inside BJP voters that the only opposition BJP gets is from BJP voters.
No, that's why I said, like, people can be unforgiving. Where from 414 seats you went to 189 very fast. Even in 2004, the India Shining campaign, and the
Yeah,
BJP was
did
expected
not
to come
work.
back, but the initial projections 6 months before the election was 200 plus, and finally it was 139 and 145 for the Congress then. So things can change very fast if you don't keep delivering. So, like I said, like things can improve in every aspect, even like even security also. Like sometimes I feel that you need to be tougher on certain scenarios, and certain stronger messages have to be given. Like for example, what is happening in Punjab right now, like sometimes greater initiatives have to be taken there to prevent certain things from spilling over, or be going back to where it was in the 80s or 90s or 70s. That is not something which the country should ever go through.
I couldn't agree more with you, Anil. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming, and I wish you all the best in whatever the future holds.
Thank you, thank you. Right now everything is an uncertainty, but I'm sure that everything will, life has its own course. That's what I am a firm believer of.
Yeah, I hope it is for the betterment of the country, because India would need more people like you in politics. So guys, we'll wrap today's podcast. Again, you can follow Anil on social media. I'll leave all his details in the description. And as far as I'm concerned, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, comment, become a member, buy the merch. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, namaste, take care,
Thank you,
bye.
thank you.